tutorial, we are going to use the simpler version of PIXLR. We're going to use PIXLR X. And when you open up your picture, we are going to experiment with just a couple of easy, quick tips on how to change your photo from color to black and white. So very first step, if you go down to Adjust, the easiest way to change it to black and white is right here. This little tab is going to change your color into black and white, but I would suggest that you don't stop there. I would suggest that you scroll down and that you play with light. The top ones to play around with are brightness, exposure, and contrast, but black, white, highlight, and shadows are also really fun to play around with. So you'll see that the brightness will kind of think about how bright your whites are or how bright your photos are. Exposure is going to deal with how dark or light your image is. Contrast is going to deal with how bright your whites are and how dark your darks are. Remember, high contrast versus low contrast. The blacks will make the dark parts of your image darker, and then the whites will make the whites whiter. You can also play around with highlight and shadows. So those are just real easy tips for working with your black and white photo. Now, you can always go back, once you play around with things, go back and move around the brightness and the exposure. So really play around with all of them so that way you can really get a strong black and white image. Just changing it from color to black and white, obviously, it will remove the color, but I think it can be a lot stronger photograph if you actually play around with your levels. If you want to keep going, you can play around with fill, toning, and curves. Curves is interesting. To work on the curves, you would double-click an area to add or remove a control point. So, for example, this control point would make my colors kind of alter depending on which direction I'm going. So you can play around with the curves. Just experiment with your black and white photography. Obviously, make sure that you save it and rename it the black and white version, because you want to make sure that you have both your color and your black and white version available to use.